I often start kind of preface my reading from this book, Life on Mars, by just saying two things. And the first is that when I was initially thinking about space and the universe and science fiction as devices, they really were just that, devices. I was trying to figure out a way of finding a different kind of distance from the kinds of topics that I find myself drawn toward. And at the simplest level, they're basically questions of why we do the things that we do to one another and what that feels like. And you know, the genre of science fiction is always a great way of imagining what a future that's characterized by the same drives that we are kind of beholden to now, what that future will look like. And I had a lot of fun imagining, you know, my version of that, and also drawing from so many of the really memorable and sometimes kitschy previous versions of sci-fi futures in film and fiction. And then as I was kind of well on my way in that process, my father became ill and passed away, and I realized that this sense of space and time and distance was also very pivotal to just kind of naming what I was feeling, which was obviously grief, and trying to imagine or construct a sense of what I wanted to believe he had become a part of. So that's what this book is about for me. And I'll start with a few sections from a poem called "My God, It's Full of Stars." Perhaps the great error is believing we're alone, that the others have come and gone, a momentary blip, when all along space might be chock full of traffic, bursting at the seams with energy we neither feel nor see, flush against us, living, dying, deciding, setting solid feet down on planets everywhere, bowing to the great stars that command, pitching stones at whatever are their moons. They live wondering if they are the only ones, knowing only the wish to know, and the great black distance we flicker in. Maybe the dead know, their eyes widening at last, seeing the high beams of a million galaxies flick on at twilight, hearing the engines flare, the horns not letting up, the frenzy of being. I want it to be one notch below bedlam, like a radio without a dial, wide open, so everything floods in at once, and sealed tight, so nothing escapes, not even time, which should be curled in on itself and looped around like smoke, so that I might be sitting now beside my father as he raises a lit match to the bowl of his pipe for the first time in the winter of 1959. Charlton Heston is waiting to be let in. He asked once, politely, a second time with force from the diaphragm. The third time, he did it like Moses, arms raised high, face an apocryphal white, shirt crisp, suit trim. He stoops a little, coming in, then grows tall. He scans the room. He stands until I gesture, then he sits. Birds commence their evening chatter. Someone fires charcoals out below. He'll take a whiskey if I have it, water if I don't. I ask him to start from the beginning, but he goes only halfway back. That was the future once, he says, before the world went upside down. Hero, survivor, God's right-hand man. I know he sees the blank surface of the moon, where I see a language built from brick and bone. He sits straight in his seat, takes a long, slow, high thespian breath, then lets it go. For all I know, I was the last true man on this earth. And may I smoke? The voices outside soften. Planes jet past, heading off or back. Someone cries that she does not want to go to bed. Footsteps overhead. A fountain in the neighbor's yard babbles to itself, and the night air lifts the sound indoors. It was another time, he says, picking up again. We were pioneers. Will you fight to stay alive here, riding the earth toward God knows where? I think of Atlantis, buried under ice, gone one day from sight, the shore from which it rose, now glacial and stark. Our eyes adjust to the dark. When my father worked on the Hubble telescope, he said they operated like surgeons, scrubbed and sheathed in papery green, the room a clean cold and bright white. He'd read Larry Niven at home and drink scotch on the rocks, his eyes exhausted and pink. These were the Reagan years, when we lived with our finger on the button and struggled to view our enemies as children. My father spent whole seasons bowing before the oracle eye, hungry for what it would find. His face lit up whenever anyone asked, and his arms would rise as if he were weightless, perfectly at ease in the never-ending night of space. On the ground, we tied postcards to balloons for peace. Prince Charles married Lady Di. Rock Hudson died. We learned new words for things. The decade changed. The first few pictures came back blurred, and I felt ashamed for all the cheerful engineers, my father and his tribe. The second time, the optics jibed. We saw to the edge of all there is, so brutal and alive, it seemed to comprehend us back. One thing that I noticed that I was doing as I was imagining, the universe as a place, as a literal place, I realized I was imagining it as an American space, which is, preposterous. Although I think there's a lot of branding in space. We have a lot of logos out there, so maybe it's not that far-fetched. But this is a poem that just kind of dips into that take. It's called "The Universe is a House Party." The universe is expanding. Look, postcards and panties, bottles with lipstick on the rim, orphan socks and napkins dried into knots. Quickly, wordlessly, all of it whisked into file with radio waves from a generation ago, drifting to the edge of what doesn't end, like the air inside a balloon. Is it bright? Will our eyes crimp shut? Is it molten, atomic, a conflagration of suns? It sounds like the kind of party your neighbors forget to invite you to. Bass throbbing through walls and everyone thudding around drunk on the roof. We grind lenses to an impossible strength, point them toward the future, and dream of beings we'll welcome with indefatigable hospitality. How marvelous you've come. We won't flinch at the pinprick mouths, the nubbin limbs. We'll rise, gracile, robust. Mi casa es su casa, never more sincere. Seeing us, they'll know exactly what we mean. Of course, it's ours. If it's anyone's, it's ours. I have a hard time keeping a straight face reading that poem because it has the word panties in it. And when I was in Lucy's workshop, she gave us a list of 3 words that we could never use in a poem. And they were panties, bovine, and shards. And so I know that I was thinking of you as I wrote that line of this poem. So. A couple of months ago, I gave a reading here in the city with a photographer named Trevor Paglin, who has just literally launched a new project, which is, it's called The Last Pictures. And it's 100 photographs that he thinks capture not the grandeur of mankind, but the real story, the story of our conflicts and the story of our dark appetites and the story of our true potential for shaping our environment. And he's had those photos etched onto a small gold disc, and that disc has been drilled to the side of a cable television satellite that's now orbiting the planet. And it's orbiting at such a distance that it will likely remain in that orbit for 3.5 billion years, which means that it will probably outlive, human culture as we know it. But also it has a good chance at the rate we're going about living the planet. So this is a poem that I felt, was like kindred to his vision. It's called The Museum of Obsolescence. So much we once coveted, so much that would have saved us, but lived instead its own quick span, returning to uselessness with the mute acquiescence of shed skin. It watches us watch it, our faulty eyes, our telltale heat, hearts ticking through our shirts. We're here to titter at the gym cracks, the naive tools, the replicas of replicas stacked like bricks. There's green money and oil in drums, pots of honey pilfered from a tomb, books recounting the wars, maps of fizzled stars. In the south wing, there's a small room where a living man sits on display. Ask, and he'll describe the old beliefs. If you laugh, he'll lower his head to his hands and sigh. When he dies, they'll replace him with a video looping on ad infinitum. Special installations come and go. Love was up for a season, followed by illness, concepts difficult to grasp. The last thing you see after a mirror, someone's idea of a joke, is an image of the old planet taken from space. Outside, vendors hawk t-shirts, 3 for $8. I'll read a poem called It and Company. It was a pronoun that kept coming up, and it was kind of synonymous with God, who kept making these, not unlike Charlton Heston, making cameo appearances in these poems. So this is a poem that I think maybe will give you that sense. It and Company. We are a part of it, not guests. Is it us or what contains us? How can it be anything but an idea, something teetering on the spine of the number I? It is elegant, but coy. It avoids the blunt ends of our fingers as we point. We have gone looking for it everywhere, in Bibles and bandwidth, blooming like a wound from the ocean floor. Still, it resists the matter of false versus real. Unconvinced by our zeal, it is unappeasable. It is like some novels, vast and unreadable. I'll read a couple of elegies for my father. These come from a sequence called The Speed of Belief. I didn't want to wait on my knees in a room made quiet by waiting. A room where we'd listen for the rise of breath, the burble in his throat. I didn't want the orchids or the trays of food meant to fortify that silence, or to pray for him to stay, or to go then finally toward that ecstatic light. I didn't want to believe what we believe in those rooms, that we are blessed, letting go, letting someone, anyone, drag open the drapes and heave us back into our blinding, bright lives. What does the storm set free? Spirits stripped of flesh on their slow walk. The poor in cities learn, when there is no place to lie down, walk. At night, the streets are minefields. Only sirens drown out the cries. If you're being followed, hang on to yourself and run. No, walk. I wandered through evenings of lit windows, laughter inside walls. The soul steps amid street lamps, errant stars. Nothing else below walked. When we believed in the underworld, we buried fortunes for our dead. Low country of dogs and servants, where ghosts in gold-stitched robes walk. Old loves turn up in dreams, still livid at every slight. Show them out. This bed is full. Our limbs tangle in sleep, but our shadows walk. Perhaps one day it will be enough to live a few seasons and return to ash. No children to carry our names, no grief. Life will be a brief, hollow walk. My father won't lie still, though his legs are buried in trousers and socks. But where does all he knew and all he must now know walk? Dean and I just had a conversation with some high school students, and they were asking about, the different kinds of topics that we write about. And I mentioned that in addition to those kind of big questions about, like being and love and death and all of that a poem is really helpful for sorting out. There's also a part of me that really wants everything that's interesting to me as a person to be welcome into my poems, and that sometimes means pop culture and, kind of light material. So obviously I like David Bowie. I stole his title, Life on Mars, for my book. So I'll just read a couple of sections from an homage to David Bowie called Don't You Wonder Sometimes. He leaves no tracks, slips past quick as a cat. That's Bowie for you. The Pope of pop, coy as Christ. Like a play within a play, he's trademarked twice. The hours plink past like water from a window AC. We sweat it out, teach ourselves to wait. Silently, lazily, collapse happens, but not for Bowie. He cocks his head, grins that wicked grin. Time never stops, but does it end? And how many lives before takeoff, before we find ourselves beyond ourselves, all glam glow, all twinkle and gold? The future isn't what it used to be. Even Bowie thirsts for something good and cold. Jets blink across the sky like migratory souls. Bowie is among us, right here in New York City in a baseball cap and expensive jeans, ducking into a deli, flashing all those teeth at the doorman on his way back up. Or he's hailing a taxi on Lafayette as the sky clouds over at dusk. He's in no rush, doesn't feel the way you'd think he feels, doesn't strut or gloat, tells jokes. I've lived here all these years and never seen him, like not knowing a comet from a shooting star. But I'll bet he burns bright, dragging a tail of white-hot matter, the way some of us track tissue back from the toilet stall. He's got the whole world under his foot, and we are small alongside. Though there are occasions when a man his size can meet your eyes for just a blip of time and send a thought like, shine, 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 straight to your mind. Bowie, I want to believe you. Want to feel your will like the wind before rain, the kind everything simply obeys. Swept up in that hypnotic dance, as if something with the power to do so had looked its way and said, go ahead. I'll finish with a new poem, or a newer poem. This is called After a Line by Goethe. I sometimes feel the weight of this life bearing in and down, a persistence. The little voice needing something and then something else, insisting. The day at our door like a brazen beggar, give all you can spare and then give more. One neighbor out front laughs like a fool, his cloud of smoke drifting slowly in the cold, not disintegrating until it has traveled some way. Sometimes I draw in my breath and sense the edge of what touches us, what we live limbed by, which is sharp and cold, like a clean knife, but also heavy, dull, a great stone wall that doesn't budge. Sometimes, against instinct, I feel an immense gladness for everything demanding my surrender. The little voice crying out in thirst, and again, so that what was just offered can be taken away. We are shaped and fashioned by what we love. Like those houses you come upon sometimes in a clearing in the woods, empty, askew, shot through with daylight, roof collapsed under a transgression of vines, foundation churned to rubble by insatiable roots, the ones that always somehow seem to be singing. Thank you very much.